During his electoral campaign, President Trump repeatedly emphasized that tariff was one silver bullet for American citizens' hardships relating to unemployment inflation. It is our declaration of economic independence, Trump said. Jobs and factories will come roaring back into our country, and you see it happening already. In fact, so confident was the president about the efficacy of his tariff plan that he declared April 2nd to be the Liberation Day, the day when the reciprocal tariffs were to go into effect. The president and his officials gave many reasons for the plan, at times touting tariff as a way to help the US government reduce its dependence upon income tax as the main source of revenue, and sometimes as a way to reduce trade deficit with countries that were supposedly taking advantage of the US. It has been difficult to rationalize on what criteria tariffs were imposed. The plan set a 10% baseline tariff for all imports coming into the US except for Canada and Mexico. The plan also imposed steep tariff rates on other countries, including 34% on China, 20% on the European Union, and 26% on India. The average effective US tariff rate rose from 2.5% to an estimated 27%, the highest in over a century. However, economists around the world and institutions such as IMF have warned that the escalating trade wars due to Trump's imposition of tariffs and the reciprocal measures taken by other countries may prove to be disruptive and lead both the American and the global economy into recession. And just as the tariffs went into effect, the stock market began tanking and investors lost trust in the American bonds, considered up to this moment the safest of all bonds. And so, the Trump administration announced a 90-day pause on rates exceeding 10% for most countries. However, the Trump administration increased its levies on China to 125%, with some products facing tariff up to 245%. Now, with the big tech's presence at Trump's inauguration, and then having toed the line on some of Trump's populist policies, it seemed that big techs wouldn't be at the receiving end of Trump's policies. Further, both have one common adversary, China. For big techs, China's innovative tech firms can cut into their market share, while for Trump, China is a threat against the US's economic progress and national security. So while it is difficult to rationalize how tariffs were imposed in the first place, once the tariffs were paused, officials of the Trump administration emphasized that the end game was always China, and it seemed logical enough. However, the problem is that in the aftermath of the pause of tariffs, the Trump administration announced restrictions on export of H-20 chips to China, citing worries that it can be used to build a supercomputer, and NVIDIA, the California company at the heart of the revolution in artificial intelligence technology, lost billions of dollars from its market value. The US restriction also hit the MI308 processor made by rival chip company Advanced Micro Devices, and its share dropped 6.5%. In Asia, South Korean semiconductor businesses such as Samsung and SK Hynix fell by about 4%, and the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company dropped 2.5%. These chip-making companies are not the only ones to lose. Trump's tariffs and the uncertainty surrounding them have reignited cost pressures and supply chain complexities. Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, Tesla, Google, and Facebook are dealing with trade policy disruptions, regulatory pressures, and market instability. Since Trump's inauguration, the combined value of all these companies has dropped by $4.2 trillion, reflecting growing uncertainty. The price of critical tech hardware like semiconductors, servers, and cloud infrastructure has gone up sharply. These components are usually sourced from a globally connected supply chain. And when tariff hits, it immediately raised cost across the board and slowed down IT infrastructure rollouts. Further, training large scale models like GPTs or other generative AI systems require massive computing power and cloud storage. Since these resources are affected by higher cost and uncertain availability, progress in AI development is slowing down. AI infrastructure has also taken a hit, and Microsoft has put on hold more than $1 billion worth of new data centers projects in Ohio and other US states. Further, China has also hit back with its own tariff, this time a hefty 34% on US tech exports. And the European Union has also turned up the heat on big American tech. Using its new Digital Markets Act, the European Commission recently fined Apple 500 million euros and Meta 200 million euros for anti competitive behavior. These fines come with stricter rules that limit how tech companies can operate within the European market. So, the early optimism of profits accruing from Trump aiding the growth of big techs has not been materialized. In fact, the losses have been far greater. Many economists have argued that Trump's tariff could prove to be a blessing in disguise for India, as it faces much lower tariffs than its neighbors, and it will also convince the government to make some long due revision in its taxation policies. However, others have pointed out reasons to be cautious. India's IT sector has the largest share of India's export surplus with the US, and it might suffer as Trump's tariff are likely to suppress consumer demand in the US because they will make most things costlier. The enhanced role of AI in companies had already caused worry in the Indian IT sector, and tariffs might prove to be an additional shock.